Hey everybody, Aaron Cowan, Sage Dynamics, and this is the Trijicon MRO SD. Just recently released, the MRO SD is another offering in the MRO family, which addresses some of the issues that the previous MROs have had. The MRO has been around for quite a while now, and every new iteration has given us new features and improvements on performance. The last big change for the MRO was the MRO HD, which provided a multiple reticle system that was optional on the ambidextrous knob up top, which is one of my favorite features. And it allowed us to go from center dot to also a segmented circle reticle, and to flip basically the turn of a switch, which was pretty cool. But some people found the reticle was too busy, or it affected battery life, or some of the other concerns that people had. One of the big fixes that they did on the MRO HD that most people aren't aware of, and even my own review didn't really mention this very well, and that review's on YouTube from a couple of years ago, is they definitely fixed the alignment parallax issue that the original MROs had. So even though it has a larger objective window and it has a larger optical window from the shooter's perspective, the original MRO did have some parallax issues, which means if your reticle wasn't kind of centered where you zeroed it, you would have an appreciable, noticeable effect on point of aim versus point of impact if you're doing your holds properly. That was something that was fixed on the HD, and that carries over to the SD. The biggest thing about the SD is they've further improved the perceptible notch filter, which is something I don't hear a lot of people talking about, but just looking through this optic, you don't really notice that bluish tint that you used to notice with previous generations of the MRO. Now, that particular improvement is very important for a number of reasons. One, it gives you closer to true color perception through your ejector lens. Two, it allows for greater light transmission in adverse environments such as low light, or for some people, passive aiming with night vision. I shoot a lot of night vision. For me, passive aiming is something I'm going to do if I have to. And if you're not familiar, passive aiming is where I legitimately establish a cheek weld and use my night vision device to look through my optic. One of the biggest reasons for doing that is facing a near-peer adversary that is IR capable. I'm not going to project a laser from my LAM, my 15, my MAL, whatever I'm using, to kind of lead them right back to me. I'm going to passively aim using my reticle and engage in that way using, hopefully, not have to use my IR light because that would cause the same problem. But it's a technique that some people use. Some people also slave a night vision device to a non-magnified or even magnified optic and shoot in that way, so they forego the laser. And if you're getting into night vision, it's a lot easier to just pick up your PVS 14 or whatever you're going to buy, BNVDs, PVS 15 or 15s or 31s or whatever. And until you're able to afford a laser, you can passively aim and shoot at night vision. You will, in most situations, depending on what you're shooting and how far you're shooting, still need some kind of IR light source to kind of polarize the target so you can see them better, especially through smoke after multiple shots. But it is a viable technique that some people do and practice based on their occupation or what kind of skills they're trying to work on. So it's something that's completely reasonable. Also, one of the greatest things about the MRO is, depending on which optic you're comparing it to, it can be up to almost 45% larger objective / ocular lens than competitive optics. So you have a wider field of vision through an MRO than you do through a lot of the competition. That's advantageous for passive aiming because it makes bringing the gun up and using that kind of awkward position to acquire that reticle a lot easier. What I will say during my time with the MRO SD so far is, in low light, light transmission is fantastic. I'm pushing light down range, and there is a perceptible difference by how much light's coming through that lens, but that's because there's a coating on that lens, a notch filter, which limits certain wavelengths of lights passing through it to increase battery life, because you don't have to turn the brightness up as high to see it. In low light environments, depending on if you're using a very high powered weapon light or you're doing CQB or something like that, you may have to run the dot a little bit brighter versus a little bit dimmer like you could during the day. It just depends on the lighting environment. The cool thing is that knob is ambi, so it's super easy to make your adjustments on it, and the light transmission is much better on the SD than it is on the HD or it is on the previous generations of MRO, to my perception. So it is a little bit subjective. And Trijicon can, of course, speak to that better than I can. But so for low light, it's fantastic. Getting into night vision, Using a set of white phos 15s, I'm getting very good light transmission through the optic, much better than my HD. Even though my HD is perfectly usable, I notice a significant difference in light performance, how much light's coming through the lens on the HD than I do on the SD. So they definitely knocked it out of the park on that. Passive aiming with this thing is fantastic. Dot blooming, brightness, crispness and quality has always been good for me on the MRO, so I didn't notice any significant changes there. But passive aiming, low light use, daytime use, all fantastic. Parallax issue has been fixed carrying over from the HD to the SD, so you're really going to have to get a really bad sight picture with this thing and a really bad parallax alignment to notice an appreciable difference at reasonable ranges. Obviously, the further out you're shooting, the more you have to be aware of if you're properly centering that dot as close to as possible of where it was zeroed. So this video is pretty much just an informational, but I just wanted to talk to you guys about just my experience so far using the SD. I mounted it on Sons of Liberty 11.5, which is a night vision capable gun, so I did a lot of shooting both daylight because I'm working on some other suppressor reviews and stuff like that, and this rifle's pretty much my mule. I use it for a lot of different reviews, especially suppressor reviews. Sometimes it's converted to be a machine gun, sometimes it's not, but I also use it for a lot of night vision stuff and personal practice because it's a favorite gun of mine. Daytime, there's nothing bad, nothing nitpicky to say whatsoever about the MRO. It's a very fast acquisition because of that larger window, and running it on a higher mount for me makes a lot of sense, especially when I start putting on plate carriers and stuff like that to do some low light or some night vision shooting. And like I kind of already alluded to or actually talked specifically about with the night vision shooting, passive aiming is fantastically easy. Low light use in conjunction with a weapon light is easy. I'm not noticing any significant detrimental effects of light transmission through the lens, so I'm getting a lot of really good performance out of this thing that kind of kills, for me, the stigma that I had with previous generations of the MRO where it might not have been my first choice. I always wanted the MRO to be the best because of the window size. And now, I think they finally nailed it. I'm sure it can get better, but the significant improvements here are light transmission, and they have improved and further ruggedized the adjustments. So I'm getting that half MOA adjustments for more precision aiming. I can pair it with a 3x or a 4x magnifier. They have the available mounts for that, or you can go aftermarket like their Unity Tactical or somebody like that, and you're getting an optic that just gives you a whole bunch of forgiveness when it comes to initial acquisition and cheek weld and getting in there. That's not as important during the day. Coming from a low ready or high ready, high port, usually that's pretty straightforward. In low light and then transitioning into night vision, especially if you're going to do passive aiming, it can be a little bit more complicated, and this optic is going to be much more forgiving for that. So this definitely makes this optic a significant contender for an optic that's going to fit all of those categories, and I definitely appreciate that. Now, I'm sure I'll do an update on my experience with the optic in the future, but you're going to be seeing it quite a bit because this is pretty much my new go-to. I'm going to be picking up a few more of them, and I'll let you guys know if there's any performance issues or just how things are going. Another video in the future. Till next time, Aaron Cowan, Sage Dynamics. Train accordingly.